One of the keys to a successful food plot is getting a soil test. That's like a roadmap that tells you what you need, what you can and can't plant, what your soil is ready for, what it's not ready for. Basically, the best chance of success is understanding what your soil needs. We're going to bring in Brad Harper, Harper Growing Solutions, who is an expert in the field of interpreting a soil test. There's a lot of times where there's something I might not understand. I reach out to Brad. Brad also runs the Plot Doctor line with Harper Growing Solutions. So we're going to bring in Brad. We're going to talk about some of the soil tests we use, we look at, and what Brad's looking for. So now we're joined by Brad Harper, Harper Growing Solutions. How you doing, Brad?
Good, you?
Great. So we're going to talk about soil tests. This is one of Brad's expertise areas. He works with these all the time. Like I have to see him to help people select seed, select fertilizer recommendations. But Brad really dives deep into these. We're actually going to look at two different soil tests when we're done here. We're going to look at one of the Rock River labs that we usually recommend, and we're going to look at one of Brad's, and you use
A&L labs.
A&L. Where are they out of?
They're out of Indiana.
Indiana, okay. And it's looking at the two, there's a big difference. Brad's A&L Laboratories really gets into the micronutrients. But the two numbers I'm really looking for, pH and organic matter, are both there. But so soil test, why do we need a soil test? I tell people it's kind of a roadmap. You know, if you're driving somewhere, and I kind of dated myself on one of our last videos. We use an atlas. And again, probably people don't know what an atlas is. But anyway, it's kind of a roadmap. You know, it gives me an idea as a seed salesman what is going to work, what isn't going to work, what kind of inputs we might need. But so if we're going to take a soil test, a lot of questions. How many do I need per food plot? Is there a certain recommendation? So let's say we've got a half-acre food plot. What do you think?
So let's just say that we got a nice square rectangle. I'm really good at art. I normally come in from the corners about 20 yards or so, you know, pop four there and just kind of zigzag and grab a different samples
Okay.
throughout that whole thing. And then you can mix them all together and pull your actual core sample out of that.
Okay, so we're not doing a sample here, sample here, sample. We're just grabbing a little bit to
Grabbing a
make.
little bit of dirt.
All right.
And normally everyone says, well, how many per food plot? Well, let's say that's a half acre, which is probably the most common that we run into. I'd say you only one. The only time that you might need more is if you have that same half acre, but maybe you have a huge sand ridge here, or maybe you have a really low spot over here. Depending on how big those areas are, you might want to pull two separate samples. So if this whole middle area is fairly consistent, maybe we do the same thing, zigzag, we grab a few different ones, combine that into one sample, and then if you got two sandy spots or low spots, wet spots, then we could plug a few here and a few there, then you'd have a separate sample. That'd be the only time I would really do that.
Okay.
Otherwise, one is, pretty good.
So is there a certain size food plot where you think maybe I want to get more than one? Like I might do this half, other than the different soil structures, but this food plot is so big, I want to do this third, we want to do like Brad's plot north, Brad's plot middle, Brad's plot south. Is there a certain size you might want to do there?
Yeah, I'd say anything bigger than 2 acres.
2 acres?
Even if it seems fairly consistent.
Okay.
Just because you're going to have some sort of a change
Sure.
there, and then depending on which gets shaded more, which gets sun more, if it's on a little bit of a grade where your runoff is going.
Okay.
I think once you get to that bigger size plot, then it's well worth taking a second one.
Okay. Is there like a certain size? So for, there might even be somebody that I've seen, we've helped people with 12-acre food plots, 20-acre food plots. Is there, so for every 5 acres we want to do a test, or every 3 acres we want to do a test? Or is there a formula you recommend? Or?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm going to say like if it's a 20-acre, we're normally probably running 4. Mm-hmm. But I kind of keep the same strategy here. So it's how consistent is it? I mean, if you got a whole 10-acre field out of that 20, or a 10-acre parcel out of that 20 acres, that's all super consistent. Mm-hmm. We probably could get away with 1 or 2.
So maybe the first time doing a big food plot, you want to take a lot, and if there's consistency, we can kind of back that down later on in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, another question possibly. Let's say we're in the woods here. Okay, I'll be another good artist. Got a little food plot here. Got some woods. We got another food plot here. Is there a certain distance we want here? We want to do a soil test on this food plot. If we're 200 yards apart, we probably want to do one here. But if we're only 30 yards apart, do we want to do one on each side?
Yeah, so again, I kind of run the same concept for the first time. Mm-hmm. I would test them both and just see how close. Because even if it's 30 yards in between, that's close enough to where you could probably say that it's the same and you wouldn't have to worry
Sure.
about taking a second one. But that first initial test just to see, that's well worth it. I mean, that's the same thing as should I get a soil test to begin with. It's like just get one. Once you get that back, you'll be able to tell how consistent they are, and then you'll know going forward.
So if there is some consistency, doesn't matter what this length is, you might not have to do the soil test every year. You could just, if you're doing the same amendments, same planting styles, you might just be able to pull one from here.
Correct. As long as you're doing the same thing on both, and if they're super close. Now, if you're even if they're fairly close, but you're running different crops,
Okay.
then it might be worth keeping up on those with
Sure.
separate samples. We have seen it in the past where, maybe this is only 10 or 20 yards, but they're running grains over here and brassicas over here. Well, then maybe let's just keep an eye on them, see how they do, and maybe it's something that's
Yeah,
not.
because brassicas take so much more nutrients.
Yeah, maybe it's not every year. Maybe every other year we're pulling them just to kind of keep an eye on them.
Okay. When you're pulling soil, what's your favorite method? How deep do you think folks should go? What do you think that
Yeah, so
looks like?
I really like the things on Amazon. You can buy an actual soil sample plug, plunger, whatever you
little
want to call it.
T-handle that's hollow
Yep.
tube?
Yep. I mean, I think they're like $10 on Amazon.
Okay.
So it'd be well worth just doing that. That way you actually get a solid core. Now, a lot of the times, like if you actually go in with a shovel, you're going to end up with more of a V shape. When I pull that out, I still try to pull a center core out of that. That way you're just getting, maybe an inch wide, maybe 2 wide, but you're getting from ground level all the way down to 4 to 6 inches. We don't have to go crazy because we're not farming, but 4 to 6 inches
Okay,
would be a good start.
If we're using a shovel, how deep does this need to be right here? How deep do you want folks to go?
I'd say 6 is the most.
6 inches. Okay, so I've been doing 2. That's not deep enough.
I'd go probably
Okay.
4 to 6.
Good to
The
know.
only reason I say that is because, some of them tubers we're going to be pulling down low, especially with clover and chicory. We're going to get some roots down deep.
Okay.
It's just nice to kind of know what's down there. Now, if you've been pulling 2 and you have no issues growing food plots, don't change just because I just said 6. If you're growing 2 and everything's working fine, then don't listen to me. Then that's fine.
So when the amount of soil, okay, so you mix it all up, let's say in a 5-gallon bucket or ice cream bucket or whatever, how much do they need per test?
Normally the bags will have a line on them. Tell them where you fill, and if it says fill to here, I'd put a little more.
A little more?
Or a lot of guys will just throw them in a quart-sized bag.
Yeah.
If you fill that up in a quart-sized bag to where you can barely close it, that's enough for them to get a good
Ziploc
sample.
storage bag.
Yep, just a 1 quart.
Okay,
That's totally
clean,
fine.
but it's got to be clean. You can't have olives or yesterday's sandwich in there.
No.
No. Okay, so a quart-sized Ziploc storage bag.
Yep, that's totally
Okay,
fine.
it's 2 to 6 inches deep. Okay, well let's. Is there anything you can add to this, and then we'll go take a look at a couple of
No,
tests.
I think this is probably the 2 questions that I get the most about soil sampling, than like how often. I think when we look at consistency, that's probably just the number 1 thing is how consistent is that? How many different types of soil do you have in there? And then number 2 is when do you test? So if we can test before we do lime or make amendments, then that's going to be a clean sample, and that's going to be your best bet, because then we won't have anything affecting that sample going forward. We'll be able to figure out what we need, and then we can add it after.
Okay, one more that we get a lot here. How often? Every year. I tell folks my opinion, my thought process is the worse soil you have, absolutely test every year. Okay, until we start to see you really make like 3% organic matter, we get up over 6 in the pH. We want to see those numbers moving. Okay. The other thing I tell folks, and we were talking about this earlier, is when you do your test, make sure it's before any amendments are added for the year. Like if you're going to lime right now, do the test first, then lime.
Correct. Yeah, I think that it depends on what you're using. Like with the liquids that we're using now, you don't have to test every year. You can get 1 test. We can draw you up a program, and we know exactly how that's going to affect those soils.
Okay.
So we don't have to. But if you're using ag lime or pellet lime, if you're using granular fertilizers, you're going to want to, because when you throw out that granular fertilizer, not all of that's going to get used by the plant. Some of that's going to get in there. That's going to change pH a little. So it'd be worth doing that if you're using those amendments.
Okay.
With the liquids, you're fine. You don't have to do it every year.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right.
Take
Let's
a look at
take a look at a couple of tests here. All right. So here's a Rock River Lab soil test. We're looking at two numbers when I get them from folks. Okay, I really don't pay too much attention up here. You know, a lot of people, they ask me, what do you want me to put down when we send these in, because Rock River asks for these, you know, are you planting greens or alfalfas? And keep in mind, they deal mostly with farmers. I really don't pay attention to this. The numbers I'm looking for is the pH on the soil. I'm looking at the organic matter, and then they do make a recommendation for some inputs down here, but I just like to know what these two numbers are. And we'll get into one of Brad's tests after this one, but that's pretty in depth. But Brad, this one's pretty easy to interpret. You know, that's what I like about this. It's very simple.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'll say, because if you look at a few of the bigger companies that provide soil samples for food plots, they are missing this portion here, which is the base saturation, and that's a pretty important one to look at, because that's going to tell you your CEC, your calcium, magnesium, and potassium numbers. And that's something that, depending on CECs, we might be able to use that as a kind of like a baseline when we're going at building soils, as well as magnesium. A lot of guys think that they have clay, but it's really just high magnesium, and having that on your test is just nice to have. So that's definitely a plus for them.
But this is definitely something you could work with. If they, I think we've a couple times.
Yeah.
We made a recommendation to you to take a look at something like this. But when you do get a soil test, again, this is not needed up here, the inputs recommendation. I'm just looking at here, here, and then this down in here. That's what we're looking for. If you do get a soil test, I know Rock River Labs does put the organic matter percentage on. And there's a lot of them that charge extra that we've looked at before. And it's, to me, I'm just looking at that on what our spring planting is going to be. Like, do we need the soil builder, or sometimes people want to just do the buckwheat roll down method. You know, if this number is lower, I'm not recommending the buckwheat method. You know, same thing. A lot of times it's going to be where they're located. You know, we do so much work with guys in northern Michigan. You know, you'll never see this. This is always, you know, 1.5, 1.4. It's really, really bad. Brad, is there anything else you can talk about on this soil test?
No, I think that's good for this one. I think if we take a look at ours, we can kind of dive into that, the micro part of it.
Okay, let's bring up, now this is one of Brad's right here. Let's see if I can you read that? Let's see. Yeah, that looks about right. I think we can see that in there. Let's try that. So this is a little bit different now. Rock River Labs would send us, what is this, nine or 10?
Samples.
Okay, 9 different samples, and that's all listed over here. Okay, it goes out of focus. So it's all, these are all the different samples all over here. Okay, so Rock River Labs would send us 9 different pages, but you've got everything on one page, and you've got your organic matter. Okay, you've got your pHs right here. And then down here, though, this is all your micronutrients?
Correct. And then on the right up there, it gives you your CEC as well as your base saturations, which I really use for all of our recommendations.
Okay.
And then I think that at least once, or if you're just starting a brand new food plot, or if you're having issues growing, it's well worth getting the micros, which are hard to find on a lot of tests. But down here, you got sulfur, zinc, manganese, iron, copper, and boron. Everything else up top could be fine, but if we have one of these down here that might be off by a lot, that might be one of the issues why we're having trouble growing, even though it doesn't seem like a big deal.
Okay.
That could be something to look at. So I think if you get micros on a plot one time, just to keep an eye on it, if that's something that it's super low and we need to make an amendment, we can, but at least we'll know that, because that might save you a ton of time and years and money and effort.
So there might be micro numbers on this test that we're not seeing on the Rock River Labs test. But if you're having, you know, you've got your OM is up, you know, you're using the liquids, your pH is good, and you're still struggling, you get a little bit of, you know, yellowing in your brassicas, or maybe the deer just aren't eating things, there might be a micronutrient we need to look at.
Yep. And that's why I say I wouldn't recommend you having to do that every year, just because that's not really worth the money. But just getting that one time, just so we can take a look at that and know down the road if we have an issue, hey, well, you know, you had a couple micros that were low in that test. Let's make an amendment to bring those numbers up and go from there.
Okay. So one thing, though, Is there a spot where we can go? I know we need to put that on our website eventually. When we're looking at some of these numbers, like your phosphorus, what's good, what's bad, what am I shooting for? Because I think a lot of folks watching this right now are looking at this and their eyes are glazing over, and we don't want people to get scared off, but we want them to understand this. Is there a place where they can go, whether it's on your website or maybe we'll put something on our website, or is there a place to go where people can look at these numbers and say, okay, my copper, it's at 1. What's good and what's low?
That's what I really love about A&L, and it might be hard to see in the video, but you can see there's like a L, a M, an H.
Oh, it does
a
say, yep,
VH.
yep,
So
okay,
you
I
got
see that now,
low,
yep.
medium, very high. Now that right there is just going to be a super easy. You look, okay, hey, this is low.
Okay.
How do I adjust that? Well, that can be fairly easy going from that point. Now, I wouldn't pay too much attention, and I don't really ever do with phosphorus here, your potassium, magnesium, calcium up here. I'm looking more at your base saturations. That's going to tell you a lot more as far as what the plant's taking up. So don't get too carried away with these numbers here. But when you look at all your micros and stuff, rather than trying to wonder if that number's good or bad, that's what's really nice with them. They actually tell you right there, where you're at.
Okay. And these A&L laboratory tests they can get right off of Harper Growing Solutions?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what we get a lot of questions of, why are ours a little more, and that's just because when we do that, once we get that test, we'll give you recommendations, and then a lot of the times those guys will call me and we'll actually go through the soil test and I'll explain if they have any questions. We can talk about, what seed types to use or seed blends, as well as give you the recommendations for the liquid. So that's something that if you don't know 100% of what you're looking at, just give me a call. We can walk through that and try to answer all your questions.
All right. Sounds good. Anything else?
I think that's it. I think that's a pretty good rundown of, what you're looking at and really what to look for, and a really good starting point.
All right. So that's soil test in a nutshell. Brad, is there anything else you need to add?
No, I think we covered it pretty good. Definitely. If you have any other questions that we didn't get to, leave a comment or, let John or me know. I know we were going to get together soon and do a lot more videos. So if there's any topics you want us to kind of cover as far as seed or fertilizer, just let us know and we'll definitely do a few more.
Yeah, trying to, like I said before, this is not very entertaining. Two guys standing in front of a chalkboard, This is educational. That's what we try to do here on this channel. Yeah, by all means, if you've got any questions, ask them in the comments below. Reach out to me. Reach out to Brad. How do we get a hold of you, Brad?
Yeah, I think Facebook, Harper Growing Solutions, or harpergs.com would be the easiest.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks for watching, folks, and we'll see you in a few days.